Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Guarantee Act. Background. Overview. The law on paper. The law and the Constitution of India. The law in action. Academic research.
Academic research has focused on how the scheme impacts agricultural wages. Several studies have found that agricultural wages have increased significantly since the inception of the scheme. This indicates that overall wage levels have increased due to the Act. However, further research highlights that the key benefit of the scheme lies in the reduction of wage volatility. This highlights that NREGA may be an effective insurance scheme. Ongoing research efforts try to evaluate the overall welfare effects of the scheme. A particular focus has been to understand whether the scheme has reduced migration into urban centers for casual work.
Bad effects of the MNREGA on Indian economy.
In a progressive and open economy, government has no business doing business, it only has to govern. Business should all be held by the private sector. Government should not provide any employment opportunities by creating artificial jobs. But the MNREGA broke that rule, resulting in widespread hyperinflation, unemployment, lack of investment by government, current account deficit as labor became costly and cost of living went up. More money supply, which was not investment but expenditure, resulted in more money chasing the same supply. Unorganized labor became costly in Indian economy, creating hyperinflation in agriculture, manufacturing, construction and real estate sector. Government intervention in labor market and rural economy resulted in widespread artificial labor shortage as labor force preferred easier work and better wage in NREGA than working on agriculture fields of farmers. Labor shortage resulted in higher cost of labor and inflation of the resulting product in agriculture, manufacturing, construction and real estate sectors. MNREGA broke village economic cycle, which relies on interdependency. It has only increased absenteeism from regular employment, and wage levels in traditional vocations. Instead of working additional hours, enhancing incomes and climbing the aspirational ladder, the rural people seem to have given up their regular occupations and chosen to be satisfied with their current levels of income and consumption. Almost 300% rise in the agriculture labor cost and created major unrest in the economy. Vast stretches of land has become barren in rural areas for want of laborers. Villages cannot sustain so many unskilled laborers and not so literate labor. By creating useless work, MNREGA is promoting dependency among the unfortunate rural, illiterate and unskilled population. This is, indeed, a social crime. Because of MNREGA, wages for agricultural labor have gone up by 2.5 times and agriculture is becoming increasingly unviable. Farmers feel that it is better to sell the land and put that money a bank FD. It is beset with corruption and leakages, populist, politically motivated and manipulated by the UPA for its own electoral advantage. It is said to be responsible for runaway fiscal deficits, inflation and slowdown of growth, to the extent that such populist schemes helped raise wages without raising productivity. They have contributed more to inflation than to rural wealth. Worse, such schemes have undermined rural prosperity by cornering resources that may have been better utilized in projects such as rural roads, water systems, cold storage facilities and agricultural research that could have sustained rural growth over the long term. The government has spent roughly Rs 2.3 trillion cumulatively on the scheme, without creating any durable assets that could spur rural growth on a sustainable basis. To be sure, those at the bottom of the rural pyramid did witness a turnaround in fortunes over the past decade. Wages of rural laborers have seen a sharp spike since the mid-2000s, after years of stagnation. However, estimates by the chairman of the Commission for Agricultural Costs and Prices, Ashok Gulati, show that the fast rise in farm wages owe more to the pull effect of growth. The construction boom, for instance, raised demand for labor and thereby wages, than to the push effect of interventions such as MNREGA. Indian goods became costly compared to other South Asian and Southeast Asian economies. When laborers demand higher wages, producers have to price goods higher. The rise in rural wages has for the most part contributed to cost inflation in farms. In all states but Andhra Pradesh, the inflation in wages has fueled more than half of the total increase and has just by itself increased total costs by 10%. There have been enough reports and study done on the negative impact of NREGA on the labour market both in the industrial and agriculture sector. Along with the rise in wages, NREGA has been blamed for non-availability of labour across sectors. The benefit of NREGA in asset and infrastructure creation is debatable. Leakages and pilferages of NREGA have led many to talk about the utility of such a scheme. Rather than scrapping a scheme which increases corruption and disrupts the labour market, government is promoting it, which can only be disastrous in the long run. Indian middle class saw a major hyper-food inflation with over 20% rise year-on-year. Food security bill, food distribution schemes of state governments, doles and freebies made life difficult for the general public, as both salaried middle class and other lower middle class has to suffer a hyperinflation. Investments dried up as government did not have enough money to invest in growth sectors like infrastructure. Government expected private companies to do investments, as it concentrated on expenditures for welfare schemes. But, tightening of monetary policy by RBI and high interest rates as a response to hyperinflation resulted in private companies backing out from infrastructure investment. Investment cycles stopped and resulted in widespread unemployment and business closures. Government focused on expenditure-based economy to one based on investments. This resulted in supply constraints in the economy. Government finances were focused on providing subsidized goods and government was dependent on private companies for investments. More money chasing the same supply resulted in hyperinflation. India's ever-growing youth used to get jobs through outsourcing as the cost of labor has been less compared to other countries. Now because of wage inflation, India is losing this edge. Real wage growth has been negative, though wage has increased in rural areas. Inflation created by NREGA negated the wage growth. Basically population were becoming poor, as value of money went down. Government ability to invest has been constrained as most of the money is diverted towards welfare schemes. Government should have invested in capacity building and wealth generation. But, the government concentrated on wealth distribution than the wealth generation. A progressive government will not intervene in labor market, rural economy or set the higher support prices for vegetables and goods. Government should allow the market forces to determine the price. Even the pay commissions added to the inflationary pressures. UPA government year by year raised the cost of the labor, food and rural economy, creating a hyperinflation. Interest rate in India hardened, resulting as RBI concentrated on containing inflation. Interest increase resulted in overall gloom in economy with all parameters going down as retail and business lending decreased. Investments nosedived in Indian economy. The UPA chose to fritter away the resources generated by high growth on shoddy populist initiatives. Most of the radical solutions the government advocated, ranging from the Employment Guarantee Program to farm loan waivers, were aimed at providing temporary relief rather than addressing the structural problems of agriculture and rural development. The rural vulnerabilities remained hidden during the phase of high growth, only to resurface later. Give a man a fish and ye feed him for a day. Teach a man to fish and ye feed him for a lifetime. Government should have focused on skill development along with productivity improvement. But, it focused on providing food by artificially inventing jobs or giving unemployment allowance if it can't give jobs. There ain't no such thing as a free lunch, it a bad effect on economy. 2014-15 fiscal year's GDP will be was below 5% and near decade lows. Government and corporate debt is high, the current account deficit has been out of control until recently, inflation reached double digits late last year, business confidence and investment are at extreme lows and corruption remains rampant. Government, rather than concentrating on productivity improvement in rural economy, concentrated on cost increase and wage increase without any productivity improvement. Government should have concentrated on providing regular income to the rural populace through multiple sources of income like more output per an acre of land, dairy farming, honeybee farming, silkworm rearing, sheep farming, pig farming, aquaculture, poultry farming, chickens, turkeys, ducks, geese and emu. This would have increased the supply in the economy, bringing down the inflation, and would have provided economic security to farmers as there are multiple sources of income. Government also should have migrated rural population away from government support through self-sufficiency. LPG, free electricity, higher support prices, fertilizer subsidies, irrigation projects should have been replaced by gas, wind pumps and solar pumps, more productivity, organic farming and drip irrigation. It is expected that UPA's right-based policies, which resulted in major inflation and wage hike in economy, will result in its defeat in 2014 general